I'm Julie Saunders.
I'm Jan Wilson. Julie and I both have experience as school librarians, and we've worked together as district library leaders.
In each episode, we'll dive into our profession with interviews and meaningful content to inspire you. We're not experts,
but we're pretty close.
The ideas and opinions shared by any host, guest, or listener are their own and do not represent those of any respective school district.
Welcome to Library Exchange.
Jan, I have to start by saying that the weather in the South last month was recently cold, winter-like.
Tell me about it. Not only have we seen 2 snowfalls within weeks, our guest today recently experienced a snowstorm that we heard is being called the Gulf Blizzard of 2025. We'll have to ask her about that.
I'm sure she has a few stories. Let's introduce her. Amanda Jones is an award-winning school librarian, advocate, and author of That Librarian, The Fight Against Book Banning in America. She has been heavily involved with the freedom to read and the right to access information.
Okay, Julie, add to that, she's a film star. Last month, she attended the Sundance Film Festival, where she is featured in the documentary The Librarians. For over 20 years, Amanda has dedicated herself to education, and currently she serves as the school librarian at the middle school she attended as a child.
We are thrilled to have Amanda Jones as our guest today on Library Exchange. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's an honor to get to speak with you.
Oh, yay. Okay, so Amanda, before we dive into our discussion, did you want to share anything about the Gulf Blizzard of 2025?
Yeah, it actually kind of was a blizzard weekend. So in Louisiana, I live about an hour from New Orleans, very South Louisiana. And, like every 5 or 6 years, we might get a half inch that we call snow, but it's really just ice. But it snowed 8 inches this past month. And it was like powder. Like, I've been skiing, so it was, it was like powder. So the kids were playing in it, and it stuck around for an entire week.
Wow.
It was unprecedented. Of course, it shut down the whole state because we don't have, we don't have snow shovels or plows or anything to handle it. So it did shut down things. So, I wasn't sad that we didn't have school for a week.
Well, we certainly can relate because we're from the Southeast also.
It doesn't take much to shut down things, but okay, so I'm glad you survived the blizzard, I'll just say.
So
Barely.
let's get started with our discussion. You were a celebrated librarian before you were a published author, and even more so today. We appreciate that your experiences have been documented and resulted in a great read. Today, we'd like to discuss the concept of soft-censorship. Some call it self-censorship, but you refer to it as soft-censorship. Could you explain the term for our listeners?
Some people call it soft-censorship and some people call it self-censorship, and it's, kind of interchangeable. The way I personally describe it might be a little different from ALA or Penn. But anytime a librarian is not ordering books because of various reasons, harassment or fear or state laws, legislation, and they're just not ordering the books, or they're weeding books, or they're quietly making books disappear, or they're just canceling things like author visits and book fairs, that is a form of self-censorship or soft censorship.
Exactly. For districts who already have a board-approved book selection policy, what strategies do you recommend when someone is dealing with an administrator or possibly a district official who are not interpreting the selection policy appropriately?
Yes, and unfortunately, we're seeing that a lot. As a school librarian, we have our policies and procedures and we understand them, but we also are pretty much what we do in the library is determined by administration. I always say a good administrators can make or break a program. And if you have an administrator or a district superintendent or a supervisor that doesn't understand the intricacies of, collection development or challenge policies, that's when you especially see censorship and, straight out, flat out censorship, or book banning, or soft censorship. And it looks very different. Some states, they're seeing it from all the way up to their governors and legislators are dictating what can be included in libraries. A few years ago, we saw in Texas, a legislator put out a list of over 800 titles of books and said, you cannot have these in school libraries. And so some districts took that to mean they were going in and just taking them all out. And some were left up to interpretation. So it's so up in the air, and the schools we're governed locally. I mean, I know we have the U.S. Department of Education for now, but we are governed locally by our local school boards. So what our school boards tell us and our superintendents and principals are kind of key. Now, as I'm very outspoken, obviously, I do not have a problem speaking my mind.
We're happy that you are.
But it comes from being able to speak my mind, comes from a place of privilege. I have worked at the same school for 24 years with the same principal. And, I'm comfortable in that I'm married. My husband has a great job. If I get fired for sticking up for my beliefs, I'm going to be okay. And I understand that not every librarian has the same privilege as me. They might not have a close relationship with their administrator, or they're scared of losing their job. And that fear can be real. And especially if you're a single parent and you're the only breadwinner in the family, I can see why people wouldn't want it to make waves. So I try not to judge. I do my best not to judge. But personally, intellectual freedom is something very important that we all need to speak up and speak out about. It just looks different ways for different people. I am just fortunate that I have a platform and the privilege of being able to be very outspoken.
Well, I think you touched on relationships, how important that is, and that commentary. Your longstanding relationship with your principal matters. I think those that are out there that are new to the position, that's good advice to start there, because if you don't have a good connection with the people around you, then what you're saying and advocating for will lose credibility. So I think that's very important and a good point. Along those same lines, in schools with selection policies that are in place, how about strategies for local school staff members who question book choices? Because sometimes a librarian's in a sticky situation where a fellow teacher or maybe clerical staff, someone on staff is questioning book choices.
As school librarians, we have to be advocates for our jobs. And part of involving the issue of advocacy is making sure everyone in the school system is aware of our policies and procedures. So I give a little 15-minute in-service to the teachers every school year at the beginning of the school year, and I do it again in January when we return back from the holidays, the break. But I go over everything. I am very clear with the staff at my school that I am the only certified school librarian on campus. So I'm going to be following the collection development policies, and they can question it, but I'm in charge of my library, and they don't have any say. They don't have any say. They don't get to tell me what I can and can't have in the library as far as people that I work with, staff members. I have had some staff come to me and say, I don't like this book, and we have a discussion. But I try to stop that before it happens by making sure everyone from the secretary all the way to the principal to the teachers understand our collection development policy and our procedures. And I explain to them, if you do not like a book, there is a formal challenge and reconsideration policy. And I explain that to them. Don't just come to me with a book and expect me to pull it off the shelf. Our policy happens to be at my school that you have to be a parent of the school. So were it to be a staff member that was a parent of the school, if I couldn't have a discussion with them, I would give them the formal challenge policy and say, you're welcome to read it and fill this out. Because I do think as a parent, I believe in parental rights. And I'm a parent myself. And so it is their right to challenge. And I would never want to take that away from them. But again, they're not just going to walk into the library and tell me to take a book out. I'm just not going to do that. But that goes all the way up to the principal. If my principal walked in and said, you need to remove this, I'm going to ask him to fill out the formal challenge policy. I don't have challenges at my school. My battle with intellectual freedom has mostly been in relationship as a citizen and resident of my, speaking out for my public library here. But I have had a few, and never a formal challenge day. You have to have conversations with parents. So I always like to reach out to the parents first and try to have that conversation, whether they're staff or not. Like what are your issues with the book? I'll defend the book and say, I use 2 professional reviews before I select these books, and they're professionally reviewed as age relevant for our students.
So before Jan asks her question, sorry, I know we're supposed to take turns, but I do just want to reiterate a couple of things you said. So one, relationships that you mentioned in your first answer, but also being proactive with the communication. Instead of waiting to be reactive, a good tip is building the relationships and being proactive with the communication that's necessary for the people at your school.
That's something I learned a few years ago from Carolyn Foote, who is one of the founding members of the Texas Freedom Fighters. I heard Carolyn say in a webinar we were in that it's better to be proactive than reactive. So I try to be as proactive as possible, making sure everybody understands the proper procedures for things.
I think, too, as educators, we are re-educated on policies every year at the beginning. I'm sure your school system is similar. So educating your teachers about this, some people shy away from the word advocating, but I'm like, you are there to educate your staff about this. And so do you do that discussion with your entire staff twice a year or just your newbies?
Entire staff.
Okay.
And they don't want to hear from me for more than 10, 15 minutes because, when you're coming back from holidays and breaks. So I say 10 to 15 minutes. I'm usually done in 5. I usually give them a handout, A few years ago, we had our school split, and it was like almost a brand new faculty. So that I gave a little more attention to, but now I will pull the newbies aside and explain. At my school, the newbies are generally kids that I taught that are now educators. So I just go and have a little chat.
I love that. I loved the comment in your book where your friend Marla said, when we were talking about just taking the book from the shelves while there's a review, and she said, books should be considered innocent until proven guilty, just like people.
And that comment is actually backed up by Supreme Court precedent. So my friend Marla said that recently in our public library, which I've been having to stand up for our public library, they wanted to do that. That was a policy that they were going to institute, that anytime a book was challenged, it would be pulled off the shelf under review. And if you're following Supreme Court precedent and the rule of law, that's not allowed. It's already been determined in a court of law that is not allowed. That is a book ban. When you take a book off the shelf and you do not allow access to that, even while it's under review, that is a book ban. And it might be temporary, but a ban is a ban. And so anybody who's listening, if you ever come across this, I have a great form letter that has all of the court cases that a First Amendment law clinic drew up for me that I present to people when they say that anyone needs to pull a book while it's under review.
Wow, great. So this is more of a comment. I know that there's probably that moment when a librarian is compiling their order and they've reviewed all the books and they've done all the things they're supposed to do according to their selection policy in their district. And then there's that moment of hesitation. What advice would you give that librarian that is basically about to make the decision to possibly soft censor themselves or to pull the plug and go ahead and follow the selection criteria?
I would hope that every librarian would follow their selection criteria. And general rule of thumb, to professional reviews, that's a little harder when you look at manga. If you're using professional reviews, and when I say professional, I mean book lists, Publishers Weekly, School Library Journal, never, ever, ever booklooks.org. That is not a valid source. And Common Sense Media, some people use that, and I would say no. I would say that is not a professional review source. I've even heard of librarians saying Amazon reviews. Like, no, professional. And I always like to point out to people that the major book supply companies, Follett, Mackin, Permabound, Bound to Stay Bound, they all have, you can set up a free account and look at professional reviews all in one, go. There are going to be books And look, I'm from the South. We're a very religious, rural, conservative district. And so there are people in my community, as there are all across the United States, that don't want their children to read certain topics. That doesn't mean those topics are inappropriate. It just means those topics might be inappropriate for certain families. However, you look at the statistics for soft censorship, the books that are being soft censorship, and this is reported by Penn, are books that are targeting predominantly books of race, sexuality, and gender identity. Books with characters by authors of the LGBTQ plus community and authors of color. And a lot of librarians will say, I don't want to have LGBTQ plus books because I don't want to deal with it. And I hate to break it to them, but they are an educator of all children. And every child in their school deserves to have their families represented on the shelves. Every child in your school pays taxes or tuition or whatever type of school you're at, and they are part of the community. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean my library is 9, 10, and 11-year-olds. So obviously, I'm not going to have genderqueer in my library. It's not professionally reviewed. But I do have books with characters that are from the LGBTQ community. And if you are not a school librarian there to serve your entire student population, in my opinion, you need to get out of the school library. The Human Rights Coalition did a study. So many kids are scared to go at school for various reasons. 9 out of 10 students report safety in the library. They feel the safest in the library. And to me, that part of making them feel safe is to make them feel seen and heard. And that goes back to those discussions and those relationships. If you have families at your school that do not want their child to read books with LGBTQ characters, that's okay for their family, and you can set that up with the parents. But to not order a book because of that is wrong. And I see, this is where I get on my soapbox. I see.
Stay on it. Stay on it.
I hear it a lot. I've had former students that are in library science classes that will say, Miss Jones, I don't believe in certain things. It doesn't matter what you believe personally. I don't care what you believe personally. You are there to serve every child and every family member. And that should not be controversial. Now, is there a fear? Yes. Look what happened to me. I spoke out about censorship, and they made memes about me across my community saying that I teach children how to perform sex acts. I've been harassed for 2.5 years by extremist groups and Christian nationalists for saying that I believe in intellectual freedom and the right to read. And it's horrible. I'm not going to lie. It's horrible. You're looking at states like Arkansas, and Iowa, Idaho, Utah, Texas, wherever, Florida, where there are lawsuits criminalizing school librarians. So there's a fear that, if you order a book, and we know we're not ordering sexually explicit books for children. We know we're not doing that. But some people equate the LGBTQ plus community to sexually explicit or indecent books. Right. And that's just not true. That's not, and so I get why you don't want to be arrested for having a book. Who wants to be arrested for having And Tango Makes Three in their school library? But that book is not sexually explicit. Librarians need to understand the importance of representation and the importance of the quote by Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop that says, books are windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. And there's a fear. I know there's a fear of losing your job. There's a fear of jail. There's a fear of harassment. And there is a pressure to not select, when you're making your book orders, to not select certain books. That is censorship. I know school librarians who say, I'm a high school, but I didn't order anything over an 8th grade level because I can't handle it right now. And that's not fair to the children. That's not fair to those students. It's just not fair.
I mean, what you just said was when librarians do this to avoid conflict, soft censorship, whatever, they're limiting access to important information and perspectives for students. And like you said before, we support all of our students because it's not your collection, students' collection.
That's a very important point. And when I talk to the students about our library, I say it's our library. It's all of ours, and we all have to take care of it. And again, I get parental rights, and I get book challenge, reconsiderations, and those relationships and everything is key. But if you're not ordering and you're not offering that opportunity, those kids, you're doing them a disservice. And I don't mean, you have to get Pride Puppy if that's not a book you think your students will like, but to not get Pride Puppy because you don't want to deal, that is a disservice to your students. And people will say, oh, well, if they can just get it at the public library or on Amazon or at a bookstore. Well, the public libraries are under attack as well. And I don't know where everybody else works, but my students don't have Amazon money. We send home, there's 50 students at our school. We send home with food because they won't eat over the weekend. They don't have money lying around for books. And that's elitist. And it's what you're doing is you're harming the most marginalized of your students, the most underprivileged and the most disadvantaged, by saying, oh, they can just get it at the public library, because we all know that not every student has a parent that will bring them to the public library, maybe because, for various reasons. And they don't always have book money to go out and spend. And so that's a disservice to kids.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment about that. Jan and I, of course, are really big into having student-centered library programs, and you hit the nail on the head by basically stating that when you are not ordering things to make yourself feel comfortable, then you're not serving your students. I mean, your library should be all about what's best for students within the framework of your selection criteria.
And, right now, the push for challenges, the push to challenge, censor, and ban books does tend to revolve around themes of race and the LGBTQ plus community and history. If you start by limiting those books, people are not going to be satisfied. We've all read, if you give a mouse a cookie, what are they going to want next? And they're going to then go after books, students of differing disabilities. It's a slippery slope that we cannot go down this road. And Supreme Court rule, as of now, supports school librarians and selection and collection and reconsideration. And right now the law is on our side.
I think people don't realize that we do take coursework for selection and how to build a collection. Julie has a question.
I do have one more. Okay. So, of course, I read about your journey in your book, which was fabulous, by the way. This is one of those going back in time questions. If you knew then what you know now, would you do anything different when speaking at that very first public library board meeting?
No, I would not do anything. And I'm going to say, for people who don't know who are listening, I'm in a very small town. It's been 2.5 years of extreme harassment, people trying to get me fired for speaking at my public library board. Hair falling out in chunks. I've lost 50 pounds. I had to take a leave of absence. I am harassed. I am called horrific names in public. I am followed around in my town with video, cameras, their phones, and it is not pleasant. However, I would not change a single thing. After 24 years of teaching, I've had, hundreds of students have reached out to me since this has happened that are in their 20s and 30s now. And I've been very supportive, but a lot of those students are from the LGBTQ community, and they have reiterated to me how important it is what I'm doing and thanked me for it. And so even though there's been a lot of hardship and a lot of extreme harassment on my end from other people that I've known my whole life, it's not the most fun experience to go online on Facebook and see the lady who taught you kindergarten call you a groomer for giving a speech at the public library. But you know what? That's on them. That's on them. And I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I know that books save lives. I know this because
Amanda, I just wrote that down.
Yeah. And people laugh at that. Oh, books save lives. No, I have plenty of students who have told me point blank, Miss Jones, I thought about taking my own life, and I read such and such book, and I realized I was not alone. Books save lives. Books are important. And I would not be the kind of person I am today had I not read books that are challenged now, like The Color Purple or The Bluest Eye or The Joy Luck Club. Books that are being challenged that I read that made me become a more empathetic and understanding human being.
Gosh, that was great, Amanda.
It was. It's incredible.
They do save lives, and our spaces can also save lives just by having a place for students to go. So thank you for
that was
saying
amazing.
that.
Yes.
Well,
Thank you for saying that.
what I will add is that books do save lives, and I've had kids that have told me that after they grew up and became adults. I also have taught. I mean, I stopped counting at around 20 when I've lost over 20 like dozens of students that have taken their own lives. And when you look at the statistics and you look at the students who have taken their own lives that I taught, they generally fall into two categories. They're veterans that served our country that were not taken care of when they returned, or they were members of the LGBTQ community. And I will not be a party anymore to any child, even if they've grown up and they're now in their 20s and 30s, who feel so ostracized and unwanted in their own community by the community selling them that they do not want LGBTQ books. I will not be a party to any other lives that are being taken. I will not be a party to that. I will always support every student, even when they're 30, 40, 50, 60.
It's amazing. Thank you for adding that. I mean, as educators, it is our job, whoever walks through the door, to provide educational services for those individuals, no matter who they are and whatever walk of life they come from. We are there for each and every student, especially in public school, where it's everyone. You educate everyone. And that's the beauty of being a librarian, is that we can help do that by making sure we're purchasing books that follow selection criteria, but also represent the students that we serve.
Representation matters.
Yes. The things that you spoke to, I'm a little speechless, and Julie will tell you that doesn't happen to me very often. But I do want to hear a little bit about Librarians Building Libraries so that we can share that out. So can you touch on that, please?
Yes. A good friend of mine, Dr. Andrea Trudeau, who is a school librarian in Illinois, she traveled a few years ago to Tanzania and Kenya, and she met a woman, Dr. Teresa Wasonga, at the Jane Adeni Memorial School for Girls, and they became good friends. And Dr. Wasonga and her have had talks about their school doesn't have an actual, like a real school library. And we're good friends with a school librarian named Tom Bober in Missouri, and we were strategizing, and we decided, hey, let's make that happen for them. And so we were strategizing ways to make it happen. And I said, I'm kind of like go big or go home. So I said, instead of just one school, why don't we form a nonprofit? And our first project is this school, but we go from there. And that it just happens to be in Kenya this year. Next year, it could be in Texas or California or somewhere. But we're going to go and build a library. Now, they have a room, so we're not like hammering with nails. But we are bringing thousands of books. And what we are doing is teaching the girls, it's an all-girls school. We're teaching the girls how to enter them into the catalog and catalog them.
Future librarians.
We're training them to be self-sufficient. So how to catalog, how to label the books, how to arrange them on the shelves and check them in and out to themselves. And we're hoping to bring all of the supplies to set them up for years to come, and all of the books, and a space that they can be proud of. It's called Librarians Building Libraries. Right now, it's just the three of us, but we want to eventually add on other people at other schools and other places. Give us a couple of years, because this is our first project. We have a website, buildinglibraries.org, and you can find us on most social media at BLDG for Building Libraries. So BLDG Libraries, and we're having several fundraiser events. I'm in a documentary called The Librarians, and it is executive produced by Sarah Jessica Parker. It is the Academy Award nominated director, Kim A. Snyder. It is a beautiful film. And so recently, while I was at Sundance for that, I got all of the librarians and the director and producers to sign the poster. So we'll be doing things like auctioning off to try to raise money.
Nice.
I was like, what can I do to try to raise money? So we're doing that. If anyone's listening, we could maybe give up your coffee for a week and give us $5. We're gonna spend your money wisely.
Can you repeat the website again, and we'll add it to our show notes?
Yes, it is buildinglibraries.org. And our social media, we're on X and Instagram and Bluesky and I don't know, everywhere. It's at BLDG libraries. And you can read all about it on our website. We have our first project. We have a webinar where we talk about what we're going to be doing. We have some blogs, and we have pictures of the school, and you can see where we're going to go and what we're going to do.
Great. It sounds so impactful and just really fun. So I can't wait to hear more about that. So you did mention your documentary that you were recently a part of. Are you able to tell us when there's an official release date or how we can access that documentary?
Yes. So I walked the red carpet. That's weird to say.
Oh,
I
fabulous.
walked
That's
the
so
red
fun.
carpet with Sarah Jessica Parker and Kenneth Cole and Maria Cuomo call their producers, and Allison Benson, lots of producers. And we just had the world premiere at Sundance, at the Sundance Film Festival, and it will tour on the festival circuit for a few months. And then PEN America is partnering with the film crew to do several screenings across the United States to raise awareness. But it officially premieres on PBS in October. So once it premieres on PBS, it will be placed on multiple streaming platforms. I don't know particularly which streaming platforms as of yet, but the major ones.
That's a long time for us to wait.
I know. We have to wait that long? Oh, goodness.
Well, look, I filmed it a year and a half ago. So,
wow.
I'm waiting. I got to see it 3 times at Sundance. It is the most beautifully well done. The team, we chose the right people to agree to take charge of this documentary. And I have to give credit to Becky Calzada and Carolyn Foote and Nancy Jo Lambert in Texas started. They were the first ones that were filmed starting 3 years ago. And I stepped in about a year and a half ago. It's an amazingly well done film.
Wow. I can't wait.
I saw on social media where they're positioning all of you guys in front of something. And then Sarah Jessica Parker comes in. And I'm like watching Amanda because I would have been like, I'm going to scoot over to this way.
Well, she spent the whole day with us, and we did interviews for Entertainment Weekly and People and Variety and Audible. What people don't realize, she's one of 8 kids, and she grew up in the library. She has a deep love for libraries, and she has her own book imprint. She just launched her own book imprint company.
Oh, we'll have to look that up.
So yeah, she's a library lover.
The things we are learning today, Amanda, you are full of information.
Yes, this is great. Amanda, thank you so much taking the time to meet with us about this important topic, soft censorship, and all the other added info that you gave us. There are so many librarians out there who've followed your journey, and they have been inspired to continue to advocate for their students' right to read. And we're just so grateful that you've shared your experiences with us today.
Well, thank you for having me and, getting to talk. I love libraries and I love intellectual freedom. And I am eternally grateful for all of the school librarians and, public and academic, all the librarians out there who send me messages of support. And it's what keeps me going. So thank you to everyone who's listening, who's been a support to me.
Well, you deserve the support. Definitely. And as we close out, Amanda, would you like to share where we can find you, where our listeners can find you on social media, in your website?
Yes, I have a website, librarianjones.com. Mostly I am on Instagram at @thatlibrarianjones. And I'm also on Bluesky. And on Bluesky, I'm librarianjones.com.
Such a valuable interview with Amanda Jones. Not only is her story inspiring, our discussion on soft censorship and the importance of intellectual freedom are fundamental concepts for school librarians.
Yeah. I was so moved hearing her story, even though I've read her book. There were so many times during her interview that I was processing what she said, and I didn't have a response because I was still thinking about her words.
Do we need to wait a day if you need more time to think about things?
Okay, Julie, my brain's operating on Windows 95 today, okay? But now that it's just us, I do have a lot to say. So we exchanged ideas with Amanda. Let's move into our recap. So what do you have for us first?
Well, she described soft censorship as librarians not ordering books or simply removing books due to fear. Some librarians have even canceled author visits and book fairs because of this same fear. Amanda reemphasizes the importance of understanding your school's collection development policy and the role of school administrators in either supporting or hindering those policies.
Yeah. You and Amanda both spoke about building strong relationships with administrators and being proactive in communication. Her personal experience of having the privilege to speak out because she had a long-standing relationship with her principal is something that bears repeating.
Well, I'm glad you brought up communication. Librarians should educate their school staff about policies and procedures to avoid conflicts. Mm-hmm. Everyone should understand that librarians are trained to select books and that there is a formal challenge process for book concerns. Educating your staff is advocacy.
Yeah. That leads me straight into the advice that she shared for librarians who may be hesitating or second guessing when they're ordering books. Everyone, she kept it very simple and to the point. Follow your district selection criteria and read professional review sources, because avoiding certain books as a result of fear is a disservice to students, particularly those from marginalized communities.
Which is exactly what she spoke up about. Despite the challenges, she would not change a thing. She believes in the importance of intellectual freedom and the impact of books on saving lives. Many former students have expressed their appreciation for her advocacy.
Yeah. Julie, I'm going to pull out one of my quotes.
Another one I can't remember.
I mean, maybe. Bad libraries build collections. Good libraries build services. Great libraries build community.
What do great libraries do?
They build community.
Great quote. Where did you hear that?
Are you doubting that it's mine? I'm just kidding. R. David Lankus, he's a professor at Syracuse University. He's well known for promoting librarians.
I think I do remember that now.
Okay.
To sum it up, school librarians, your work goes well beyond building collections. You transform libraries and lives. You have the ability to build a strong community. Continue the good work you are already doing.
Yes, keep up the good work. And last, follow Amanda Jones on social media at Librarian Jones. Her website is librarianjones.com. And we also talked about the nonprofit Librarians Building Libraries. That website can be found at buildinglibraries.org and on social media at BLDG Libraries. We'll have all of these in the show notes.
Make sure to visit our website at www.libraryexchangepodcast.com.
You'll find episode notes and links. You can even submit your questions or inspiring stories that may be featured on the podcast.
If you're looking for some swag for your library or book-loving friends, visit librarianexchange.etsy.com.
That's a lot of URLs, so I'm glad you had to say all of that, Julie.
Thanks for joining us. We can't wait to have you back for our next episode of Library Exchange.